Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Rather, and I'm proud to say Darrell Barton is my friend. He and I worked for many years at 48 Hours in many places, faraway places with strange-sounding names, and yes, lots of hellholes, including war zones. We were together. Darrell was unique, one of a kind, funny, fearless, genius, and one hell of a pro. You all know about his immense talent, but what was Darrell like behind the scenes? You're about to find out. Here he comes, the great Darrell Barton. And if you're wondering why his sound man is weighted down like a pack mule, just ask Darrell.
That is the way God intended for it to be.
What is this?
What do we got?
We got 20 tapes.
The year was 1989.
Can you take the beeper and I'll take the phone?
They were working on a new program called 48 Hours.
We are up against Bill Cosby, the most popular program on television.
Andrew Hayward was the executive producer then.
The idea was to take a single story from multiple points of view over 2 days and 2 nights, or 48 hours. Let's assume that our 48 hours is essentially Wednesday night through Friday night.
Once a week, tapes would show up and we'd start a new story. Every editor were always pleased if the cameraman was Darrell Barton. He was that good.
Here's what Darrell wasn't good at.
Just before I forget,
Story meetings. Talk bored Darrell. He craved action.
all right, there's a confirmed shooting on 15Q Northwest. We're just going to go
We're going this, ma'am?
Yeah.
We're going to go to the shooting as soon as we get done eating.
New Jersey. Come on, Darrell, let's go.
I spent thousands of hours literally tethered to Darrell, watching him work. I know, what a privilege. And it was. Darrell was like nobody I've ever seen.
Great idea, Andrew. What's your next plan?
This police call didn't pan out, but the night was young, and so was Darrell.
I wear these glasses simply to make me look more mature, because my youthful appearance sometimes can put people off.
What's happening?
Another call, and this time it's bad, very bad. A young man was shot to death.
Hey, folks, can you back up, please?
No one was more important in developing that immersive, fluid style of storytelling and camera work than Darrell Barton.
Darrell could shoot chaos like nobody I've ever seen.
It fits my personality. I'm not that organized. I'm a little happier if it isn't structured.
All right.
You've got to throw a lot of technique away, and you've got to throw a lot of cameraman's vanity away. What happened there is more important than whether your shot was steady.
I've worked with some of the greatest cameramen in the world. Nobody ever did it better than Darrell. There's never been a better shooter with the camera on his shoulder. He had that magic of being able to capture the moment. A father is brought in to identify the body of his son. Darrell had permission to enter, but he held back, capturing an unforgettable scene with dignity and respect. Darrell's powerful footage served as a call to arms to save other young lives.
Best thing I remember about Darrell is that he always hated acting his age. One of the first stories we shot together at 48 Hours was 48 Hours at West Point.
Dessert to cadet filer for inspection, please, sir.
Oh my God!
We had the job of following around these first-year students called plebes who have to run everywhere they go. That's how they build toughness. And we were chasing after this kid who was 17 years old, racing around West Point trying to keep up the pace. As time went on, I said, Darrell, can you keep up? Can you keep up? And he growled at me and he said, I can keep up, just keep on moving, just keep on moving, I can keep up. We did this for 2 days, and at the end of the whole exercise, the kid was exhausted I was beyond exhausted, and Darryl was like a mean-looking wind-up bunny, ready to go do some more. He said, well, what else is there? What else? I said, Darryl, the chute's over. He said, well, that ain't no fun, is it? If Darryl's energy and talent set him apart from all others, so did his face.
As most people know, he had the heart of a hero, but he had the face of a convict.
Police!
And when we were first investigating the yogurt shop murders in Austin, Texas, we walked into the police department, and the cops thought I was bringing a suspect in with me. And that was Darryl.
If he went out with this face,
Every time you look at these
you realize what would happen? He would immediately be arrested.
Darryl's dress often complemented his looks.
The first time we went to death row in Texas and we were going to interview our subject, the man who was about to be executed, we're just almost in the door, and the guy in the watchtower with this big gun stops us and tells Darryl he can't come in because he's dressed like an inmate. And, we had to get in there. I was panicking. And again, he tells me not to worry. And of course, he had a change of clothes in his truck. And he just said to me, they didn't think I was dressed like them. They just thought I looked like a death row inmate.
I wonder if I could get a quarter or something from you. Are you a homeless? If you could just help me out a little bit. But nobody will help me.
I said I don't have any money, man. I'm sorry. I'd help you out if I could.
This is my last cup of coffee, and this is getting cold.
Darrell Barton. Well, beneath that rough exterior, there was a rough interior. The guy was creative, belligerent, creative, difficult, creative, but such a pro.
But he was never difficult for the sake of being difficult.
This is a business, as many of you know, that is populated by more than a few people who can be difficult. I know, I have been one of them on rare occasions, okay? Rare occasions. But Darryl wasn't one of them. Darryl was a genuinely good guy.
A very good guy, as long as you stuck to his strict policy on lights and tripods. Leave them in the trunk.
I've shot 24, 25 of these. I've had my sticks out of the case about 3 times.
He was never about gear. I was all about gear. Darryl thought gear got in the way.
I'm shooting this on an iPhone 6. I know, Darryl, that would really piss you off, probably. But I'm not using a tripod, and I'm using natural light, no lights.
I called Darryl up and I asked him if he would bring some lights to our next shoot. And he said, yeah, I have a light. I'll bring it.
Darryl's camera in those days weighed about 35 pounds. He strongly preferred shooting on 20-minute tape cassettes.
Darrell Barton on a 30-minute cassette. Worst idea Sony ever came up with. Don't ship me a case of 30-minute tapes. I am not carrying a camera on my shoulder, compressing my shoulder for 30 minutes. I will ship this back to you.
Darryl felt the same way about young producers.
So my first shoot with Darrell Barton, I was so excited to work with this legend, and I thought I could impress him with my very helpful suggestions, and it really didn't work out that way, because shortly into the shoot, Darryl said to me, Judy, do me a favor, run to the car and get me a battery. Okay, Darryl, I'll get you. So I ran like 4 blocks, I ran to the car, I got the battery, I ran back. I'm like, here you go, Darryl, here's the battery. He goes, oh, sorry, forgot something. Can you go back to the car and get me my tripod? And I said, you don't like tripods. He goes, just get it. I ran 4 blocks, I got the tripod, came huffing and puffing back. Here you go, Darryl, here's your tripod. He goes, Judy, there's one more thing I need you to do. I'm like, Darryl, anything. What do you need me to do? I need you to run back to the car, lock the door, and stay there until the shoot is over. We somehow became friends after that.
A lesson that Darryl taught me and I never understood for several years was, if you want to work for a producer a second time, don't ever shoot what they ask you to shoot.
When covering the Exxon Valdez oil spill, this young producer panicked, believing her crew had missed an early call.
I wake up with a start and I'm like, oh my God, it's 4:30. And I'm like screaming, I'm like running, I like put my boots on, I run to Darryl's room, I'm banging on his door, I'm going, Darryl, get up. And he opens the door and he's like, Kathleen, what the f are you doing here? What are you doing here? it's 2:30 in the morning. I said, no, look, my watch says it's 4. Kathleen, just go back to bed, and if you ever wake me up 2 hours before shoot, you will never forget it. And I never did.
He developed this scale to describe the nervous energy and the inexperience of some of these young kids.
It was the Darrell Barton Poodle on a Hot Plate scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excitable was the producer?
I've always wondered what my number was. But I'll tell you this, I'm honored because I may have been the very first one.
Ooh, that's cool. One of Darrell's most famous shots was captured at Parkland Memorial Hospital.
It was a story about a fellow having brain surgery.
All of a sudden, the suction line broke.
My sucker's stopped now. And the surgeon starts to get a little anxious. Come on. And then very anxious. My sucker's stopped. And he needs another suction line. Come on, Julie.
Every second meant blood and pressure were building inside the brain.
The surgeon says, go get me another suction line.
Before we lose the goddamn patient. The closest suction line was 40 feet away. With life hanging in the balance, Darrell left the operating room.
And then Darrell breaks. I'm like, what is he doing?
What he was doing was getting this shot, the most powerful way to say the patient would survive. That shot made Darrell Barton the oracle of 48 hours.
Hey, I shot that. Almost as satisfying as a paycheck. Almost.
Out of respect, I said to him, Darryl, you're the Yoda of 48 hours. And he, Smith, you're the punk of 48 hours.
I met Darryl in Vietnam. I was a combat photographer for the Marine Corps. And the first time I met Darryl, he was a grunt.
Darrell thought he should be the combat photographer.
For those 2 days that I was with Darryl's unit, he gave me about being a photographer. He says, you have no eye. You have no imagination for detail. He says, are you sure you're a combat photographer? And I go, that's what the Marine Corps trained me to do. He goes, well, you suck.
Years later, the name Darrell Barton came up again.
I get out of the Marine Corps, and I apply for a local TV station job, and the news director says, you got the job, Ray, but you have to be interviewed by Darrell Barton. And I kept saying, that name is just, it's ringing in my ear, and I go, where do I know that name? And as the news director's talking to me, he says, he was in the Marine Corps. And I said, thank you very much, but I don't want your job. We don't get fooled again.
Good call, because here's what a Barton job interview sounds like.
Darryl is interviewing soundmen, and I turn and see him on the phone saying, I'm an ordinary son of a bitch. If I don't like how you're chewing your ice cubes in the airplane seat next to me, I'm gonna fire you.
No matter where on earth Darrell was, he insisted on his code of conduct. Rule number 1.
People in New York need to learn to keep their high opinions of themselves to themselves.
I don't need this crap.
Rule number 2.
Always be kind to the people you met in the field.
Your word's your word, deal's a deal. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And if it's something that's so hard that nobody else wants to do it, all the better. No whining, no complaining.
He practiced what he preached in Fiji, where he was covering the millennium.
He brought every aspect of the Darrell Barton we all know and love. He wanted to bond with the characters, the Ratus.
And he did.
Darryl actually got a little too close.
The village elders invited Darrell to have a drink. This man is the bartender. Darrell stepped up and took one for the team.
That's why the subjects love Darryl so much, and it makes such a difference.
He's a guy with the biggest heart and big soul.
It was just before Christmas in 1999, and there was a giant warehouse fire in Worcester, Massachusetts, and 6 firefighters got trapped in the warehouse and were killed. We went to this home where this father described losing his son, who was one of the firefighters, and described going down to the warehouse and realizing that his son was trapped inside.
I said, my God, my son is trapped. I want to hold him in my arms.
And I looked over at Darrell's camera and I could see tears coming down Darrell's face. I think he was so good, so great, because he cared so much.
Which brings us to Darrell's toughest and maybe finest hour.
There was a story we did years ago with a little 12-year-old girl who had leukemia, and she used to call Darrell Harry, for Harry and the Hendersons, because Darrell had a unique look about him that was not often clean-shaven. Every time we showed up, Darrell would put such a big smile on this little girl's face. I've never seen Darrell be kinder or gentler to anybody than he was to young Colby.
Darrell was a man defined by his work, but more importantly, by his heart. He had a heart the size of a locomotive. Our hearts are breaking now because he's left us. But you know, Darrell would never want tears. He would want us to celebrate his life, laugh about our memories, and never forget that face.